Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Relationship Schools podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gaddis. Psyched to be here. What's up? In this episode, I've got Dr. Rick Hanson. Right? Amazing guy, teacher, neuroscientist, psychologist. So stay tuned for that in a moment. First, I just wanted to thank you guys for all the awesome reviews. This is from Jiboo. Jiboo says, thank you. First, let me say, wow, I've been praying and searching my whole adult life for what you're doing. Secondly, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your beautifully brutal honesty, something this world does not have enough of. Thank you for giving me and everyone I'm sure the desire to want to get to the bottom of what's really going on inside of the person in the mirror. And thank you from the bottom of my soul in advance, because I know that my husband and I are going to find the answers that we so desire to save our marriage, love, and family. Wow. That's a powerful one. Thank you. That one got me. Jiboo. So thanks for the review. Guys, thanks all y'all for your ears and for your reviews. It does help us reach more people. If you would be so kind, if you're getting value here and you haven't left a review, to just go to Apple Podcasts, swipe up with your thumb. It says write a review. You can be 2 words. Thank you. That's cool too. Okay, appreciate you guys. All right, in this episode, Dr. Rick Hanson, like I was saying, we talk about the mystery and power of self-directed social emotional change. Like, why do people change? Like, why can you grow up in a family where you're the person that grows and changes and your siblings remain stuck? Why is that? We also talk about just learning something new and why it's so important. He talks about his 2-step process to learn something new. Rick kind of gets into some vulnerable territory about his childhood, of just how he got on the path. I always love hearing our guests about how they got involved in this crazy relationship work. You know, it's like so beautiful to be able to learn about human beings. And I love meeting people like Rick. This is his 2nd episode. Make sure you go back and listen to the first. I think it's in the 50s or 60s. I'll put that in the show notes. Okay, let's get right into it. Stay tuned to the end, as always, for your action step, and enjoy. All right, welcome back to the show, Dr. Rick Hanson.
My pleasure, Jason. I'm glad to be here. Please call me Rick. And we have a shared interest in rock climbing and relationships and good stuff like that. So I'm really happy to be here again.
Cool. Yeah, I'm psyched you're back. Listeners, if you didn't catch it the first time, Rick and I talked a lot about the brain being triggered and is developing resiliency under stress in episode 67. So you're going to want to go check that out. I re-listened to that today, actually, just kind of warm up for our interview. And I was like, man, this is so good. Well, I don't even need to talk to Rick again.
And we just covered all the greatest hits. Just
right.
Leave it right there, right?
Right. Yeah, so I know you wrote a new book, Neurodharma, New Science, Ancient Wisdom, and 7 Practices of the Highest Happiness. I want to start just with the word happiness. I want to just help the listener understand what you mean by that, because that can be a pretty charged term for some people. The more I try to seek happiness, the more suffering I create. So what do you mean by happiness?
It's a simple word that refers to well-being in general. And in terms of research on this, there are 2 kinds of well-being. There's what's called hedonic well-being, where, for example, I'm looking over your shoulder and I'm seeing a wall hanging. I like it. It seems beautiful to me. It's not $1 million moment, but there's a moment of pleasure there. You finish the dishes, you have a meal, you go rock climbing with friends. That's hedonic well-being. You watch your kid play basketball and finally take a shot because her dad has bribed her finally to take a shot, right? Yeah. So it makes you happy. That's fine. And then there's eudaimonic well-being, which has to do more with the sense of meaning and purpose. And the distinction for me is in the example of walking your baby up and down the hall at 3 a.m. because she's crying. It's not hedonically happy, but it's eudaimonically fulfilling. It's the most important thing you've ever done. So why seek happiness? Your point, is really well taken there. It's because, for one, we would wish others to be happy. We would wish that others have both kinds of well-being for all kinds of reasons. So if it's legitimate to wish that they have reasonable amounts of well-being, why not wish it for ourselves? Additionally, well-being or happiness makes us stronger, makes us more resilient, and it also tends to make us speaking for myself, less of a jerk with other people
Yeah.
and more able to be cooperative, generous, tolerant, forgiving, reasonable with other people. There's plenty of reasons to develop that. Obviously, there are pitfalls around getting attached to results and stressing and comparing yourself a ton like that. But just don't avoid those pitfalls, right?
Yeah.
Deal with the bad. I kind of have a 3-step process. I engage a million times, probably, I don't know, 10 times a day. Deal with the bad, turn to the good, take in the good. Deal with the bad for sure. But then also at some point, don't obsess about it. Turn to what's also true that you can appreciate, that's legitimate and authentic. And then as you appreciate what is also true, including a sense of your own grit or own worth or innate goodness, take it in. Help it, leave a lasting trace in your brain so you increasingly carry it with you wherever you go.
Yeah, that was actually a really good summary of kind of our last podcast together, was this notion of really noticing the good and really taking it in.
Yeah.
And really feeling that experience. And my wife and I was telling her about it this morning, and we were talking about therapists. I'm a former therapist, and the therapist mind tends to look toward what's wrong because maybe I grew up in a family trying to look for threats, and now I've become a healer, right? And I want to look for the problem so I can help fix it, right? And help resolve it. And I remember in grad school, I was in an internship, and we had to do, at the mental health center I was working at, we had to do what was called strengths-based planning. And I was so angry because I was like, no, I want to look at the trauma. I want to look at what's not working here. Why are you making me look at where the resiliency is? And now I feel differently.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you could speak to that. We talked in the last podcast about the negativity bias of the brain and why it is important to counterbalance that with the good, as you're saying here. I'm just curious, how do we do that, but not bypass what's actually true, which is maybe we're suffering?
100%. If I can, I'd like to speak to the current moment. We're
please.
In America. You and I are talking early in June 2020. Right now, America is dealing with a plague, the coronavirus pandemic that's moving through. Other countries, of course, are dealing with it as well. And then most recently, our country has been convulsed in the reaction to the murder of George Floyd, yet another Black man, killed by law enforcement in a larger context, right? So in this context, let's use that as an example. So let's suppose that someone feels helpless. They're frustrated, they feel helpless, they can't change the epidemic, they can't change the ways in which it's reasonable to practice some amount of social distancing until the doctors can really get a grip on this. All right. You can't change that. You feel helpless about it. So what do? Well, one, you have to feel it. If there's one thing I learned in my own journey, you got to experience your experience. I did not want to feel my feelings. I was numb from the neck down. My parents had a monopoly on anger in my family growing up. So I had to push down my own anger as well as many other things. So, but you got to feel it. If you don't feel it, now you may need to feel it in doses. Like I feel like I emptied that bucket of tears from my childhood, one spoonful at a time. Mm-hmm. That's what I could do.
Yeah.
And we need to resource ourselves so we can feel what we feel, like develop some mindfulness about it, have a sense that others, inner allies, maybe people who care about you are with you as you face your pain. All right. But we feel it. And what is also true? Alongside the ways that we're helpless are many, many things we can actually do something about. We can do something inside our own mind in how we relate to our experience of helplessness. We can do something inside our own mind about how we view the current situation or what we really think is important and what our personal plan is going to be. We can do those things.
Totally.
We can also make little choices. Do you make a cup of coffee or a cup of tea? I made a cup of coffee. A little earlier, silly stuff. But when you focus on the sense of agency alongside the authentic sense, understandable sense of helplessness, you can then be more resilient, you can feel better, and it moves you toward effective coping out in the wider world. Yeah. Both can be true, right? Both can be absolutely true. I think people can get stuck in one or the other. I think a lot of mindfulness practitioners, maybe some therapists as well, get stuck in just being with the pain. But at some point, it's time to deal with it or move on or be effective. Then you have other people like I was when I was younger who were into fix it, just make it go away, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
Yeah. That doesn't work either. I mean, there's a middle way. Quoting my root teacher, the Buddha, there's a middle way in which we can feel what we feel and help it flow, help it move, and then orient to what else would be beneficial and enjoyable and useful to experience and to grow inside ourselves over time.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. And how important is self-awareness and relationships in kind of the work you do, as well as this, if we kind of apply it back into this larger context of the racism going on and also the pandemic?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you raised that, and I could ask you the same question, right?
Right.
Because I guess as a practical person, I'm a psychologist. I consume a ton of research. I try to integrate it. I try to apply it, but I don't generate very much myself. I'm a methods guy. Is how I think of myself,
Okay.
and I honor that. You know what I mean? I think it's actually really heroic to be involved in a helping profession, one way or another,
Yeah.
including online, trying to train people and stuff like that. So, it's kind of in that context then that I think about this. And pragmatically, if you can pick the low-hanging fruit and solve that problem in your marriage or with your teenager or with the person you work with at work, great. If you have a quick fix, great. If you just learn some quick formula, like nonviolent communication, if you just learn some effective way to talk, great. On the other hand, if those cognitive behavioral fixes, right, where you just try to adopt a new point of view or you try to act in a different kind of way, if that doesn't get the job done, then we need to go to a deeper level. And that's where self-awareness, I think, really comes in, where you start to realize, for example, the ways that you're transferring into the present, ways you learn to be from your childhood. Your object relations, your attachment style, you're bringing it into the present. Let me use me as an example.
Okay.
I grew up in a loving, decent, stable, and still fault-finding, full of weird anxiety and over-control kind of home. So when my wife, as she did earlier today, says, "Why are you running the air conditioner? I'm freezing," and I'm thinking, "Hey, it's 95 degrees right now in California, and I like it kind of cool. She likes it kind of hot." I'm transferring into that moment, feeling unjustly accused by my mother 55 years ago,
Right.
for example.
Yeah.
And if I don't have self-awareness about that, I think it's all my wife's fault. And I think that even though what she did maybe on the irksome scale is a 1, and I'm reacting like it's a 5, I feel like my reactivity is legitimate because I don't understand that there's a preamp buried deep in my brain that's cranking up the signal, turning up the volume of what she's actually done. That might be a 1, maybe,
Yeah.
but it feels like a 5, if not a 7 or an 8.
Yeah.
But with some knowledge of my own, with self-awareness, I understand this, hopefully, about myself, and you get more and more in real time as you increase in your self-awareness. I understand that there's that turbocharger, and so if I do actually say, "Hey, honey, do you really need that tone when it's just about an air conditioner?" You know what I mean? Do we really need that tone? If I do move into that phase, which maybe I will, maybe I won't, of making a request of her rather than a demand, because I have the self-awareness, I can clear out my own tone, my own turbochargers, which are going to help me feel better and going to probably help the interaction go better too.
Yeah, awesome. Great example too. And about relationships, because you're all talking about kind of in a way, how do I remember that I'm capable of kind of meeting the challenges in my life? Why? And I know you're a big fan of relationships, obviously, but I just wanted to get your kind of to speak to that, like how critical they are in this moment in time with the stress that we're experiencing inside and out.
We could talk at a lot of length, and I'd love to know your take too, Jason. What strikes me is that this epidemic is a reminder that we are social mammals, and we depend and we live because mountain lions are not vulnerable to a plague. They live apart from each other. Humans, primates, we're vulnerable to plagues because we live close together. So because we're social, we're vulnerable, and therefore the only way we're going to solve this problem is by cooperating with each other and working with each other. And I think one of the great teachings of this time is that if everything's going fine and you're kind of lucky in some ways as a country for some years, you know, you don't really notice the effects of hollowing out the public health system over many years of firing people who were hired originally to prevent pandemics from landing in your country. You know, you don't really see the effects of that necessarily, but it's like having a 1,000 termites, individually small, but gradually accumulating over time, chewing away at the infrastructure of your house.
Yeah.
But then when the storm finally does come, when the hurricane of a plague finally comes, it lands on a house that's been chewed out from the inside out. And it's a real teaching about the importance of reinvesting in all kinds of new ways in the common good, you know, the ties that truly bind us together. And I think, you know, I'm no expert on this topic at all, and mostly I try to listen to people who are. But this moment of, you know, race relations in America and dealing with the long stain of slavery in our country, you know, is a moment where I think in new ways here as well, we realize that the need to invest in understanding each other and listening to each other and respecting each other and treating everybody, you know, with dignity, including in terms of racial equity. So that's my personal takeaway about it. And just at a practical level, because there are people who intervene at the level of policy and they make excellent points. You know, they might offer an excellent speech. I intervene probably like you, mainly at the individual level or the level of the couple or the family. And I think at this level, it's more important than ever to realize that other people are scared too, they're stressed too, they're pressured too. It wouldn't surprise me if part of what was a factor in my wife's slight snappishness earlier today, I'm using her as an example. I hope she won't kill me later. But anyway, she's a little rattled by this time. We're all rattled. We read the news. We're just a little keyed up. You know, you used to see people being a little extra snappish, a little extra keyed up. So holding them in our hearts, even if we disagree with them. Just like, okay, you're freaked out as well. Maybe I can focus myself on being a little more patient, disengaging faster from moments of friction with other people. For me, it's an ongoing practice to become, I joke, unirkable. You know, to be irked. I'm irked by that. You know, like we're irked. It's understandable we're irked. But, you know, like my recent book is really about what can we learn for the trenches of everyday life from people who've gone all the way to the mountaintop, like the Buddha. And one of the values in, I think, all the traditions of the world, including the traditions of enlightenment, is to appreciate equanimity, the development of equanimity, being able to walk evenly over an uneven ground, including with other people. And so that, I think, to me is really, really timely to be extra patient, you know, extra count to 10, remember your grandmother's advice, you know, slow it down.
Take a breath.
More than ever. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think self-awareness and relationships, coming back to that question, are critical right now. I don't know what I would be doing if I didn't have either. You know, I know social isolation, the distancing thing is, I don't know. I keep reading and I'm sensing, you know, kind of a looming mental health crisis here. With people really in pain. I mean, prior to the whole George Floyd murder, we were already kind of like boiling, right? Like, I'm kind of over it. I want out. So, and your point is, I'm with it, is like, and now is the time to come together and collaborate, because I think we can tackle so much of this, you know, if we're together. And then that starts at home again for me. How am I showing up with my wife? How am I showing up with my kids? You know,
I want to float an idea past you, and it's kind of it could be a controversial idea or kind of a heresy, because here you and I are relationship people. We're talking about relationships, and one of the things that I've just kind of reflected on lately is the value of recognizing where other people are coming from, including recognizing that where they're coming from is in bad faith. Their actual intent is to disrupt the possibility of getting at the truth of things.
Yeah.
Or they're just there to disrupt the possibility of getting to some kind of common good, some kind of common ground, common solution. That's what they're there to do. Like in social media, they're just there to stir up trouble. They're trolling, they're disrupting. Yeah. Or as someone, I speak of myself, who is in what I call half a cult. When I was in my mid-20s for a few years, one of these human potential things that was a little dodgy.
Yeah.
When you're inside one, you have no interest in changing your worldview. Your worldview is baked in. All new information just bounces off, and you look with pity with people who don't see it the way you see it. Right? So when today we recognize people like that, we have to be careful, I think, about being righteous and judgmental and pissy ourselves. But that said, at some point, like to use the Buddha's story of his own awakening, he was challenged, as the story goes, by the forces of evil, which come in the form of delusion and ignorance in a Buddhist frame. That's the fundamental evil, And he didn't go to war with that evil. He just said, I see you. I recognize you. I see you. And in the seeing, there's a freeing there. And so there's a part of me that wants to just raise the point that I think sometimes we get consumed by and eaten up by chasing side issues with people who really have no interest in figuring out how we can go forward in a reasonable way. And they have no interest actually in being morally consistent. If they say that something's bad if we do it, but if they do it, it's all just fine, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said, whether it's in your personal life, dating someone, where you start to realize they have no interest in repairing issues.
Yeah.
And they have zero interest in repairing the lack of repair. And they're going to punish you for even trying to repair some kind of misunderstanding or weird interaction. You start to recognize that, and you stop, in effect, wasting your time with that or giving them our time. And instead, what's useful is to turn more toward the people who are either functioning in good faith or kind of neutral, but at least open-minded. They're not dedicated in some fundamental way toward, acting in bad faith.
Yeah.
What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I like that. Certainly there's people who their agenda is to, dominate, destroy, hurt, kill other people. And we could go back in time and wonder where, because you and I are kind of psychology people, wonder where that came from. Sort of, how do we really develop a monster, for example? And that's an interesting conversation for me. But regardless, if someone is, quote, a monster or just playing out their thing, I don't personally give those types of people a whole lot of energy because it's not a good use of my time, right?
Yeah.
But it's tempting. Tell you what, it's tempting for me to get sucked into power struggles that I'm not going to ever win.
Yeah. I know. I think about sometimes, like I've worked with a lot of couples, and this very poignant longing that you see brought into certain relationships to get blood from the stone. That longing, and it's understandable. So there's this quest to get the kind of love or the kind of cherishing, the kind of prizing that was not given to someone when they were young, but it gets transferred in. And there's something really sweet about it. But part of the problem with it is that to play out that kind of script, the person needs to find stones.
Yeah, exactly.
Needs, right? Which is a setup, of course, for struggle. And they somehow don't even notice the people in their life, let's say, who actually would be available for relationship, would show up, would actually be decent. I think it's very sweet, that longing to own it, to name it, while also realizing
it's a fantasy.
That dog will not hunt, right? That stone will not give blood. Don't send a duck to Eagle School.
Right. Hey, everyone. I hope this podcast has been a helpful resource for you right now during this challenging time, and will continue to be so. If you find yourself with a relationship pattern that kind of repeats, or you're just not sure how to get through it, maybe you've tried therapy, or you haven't tried anything, or you keep listening but nothing changes, try checking out one of our relationship coaches here at the Relationship School. These guys have been trained and they went for it. All of our certified level 1 coaches have been through a 9-month training experience, and they have had to go through a lot of intensity in their own life to face themselves to become an effective relationship coach. So here's what one of our recent level 1 grads had to say about our training program.
Hi, my name's Shannon, and I joined the coaching program in the fall of 2019. And I joined for 2 main reasons. One, because I really had a strong, deep desire to be of service to others. And I knew that I wanted that to be through coaching. And I really trusted that Jason and his team and their wide range of experience would really provide a fabulous foundation to learn the skill and art of coaching. And 2, being a growth junkie, I just knew that this coaching program would provide a great opportunity to poke out some really hard to reach areas within myself. And it did not disappoint. What I've learned and how the coaching program has changed my life, I get to wake up each day excited and energized about what I do, my mission in life, and have the opportunity to be of service to others and to sit and have conversations and guiding others and bringing more clarity and joy into their life, all through my own experiences and what I've learned. So I just feel thoroughly grateful. I also find that I have more confidence. I speak my mind more clearly. I've developed friendships with people over the course of the year that are lasting and deep and just bring so much value to my life. So I feel really grateful to have participated in the program and to continue learning through the Relationship School.
Awesome. Thanks, Shannon. Shannon, you can hire Shannon, okay, if you go to relationshipschool.com/coaching. That's where all our coaches are listed. Shannon's one of our level 1 individual coaches. And if you are interested in applying for our training, you got to interview and get accepted, but we are taking applications right now. Go to relationshipschool.com/RCT to apply. Okay, back to the podcast. What do you think, I'm curious, I asked some guests this, what do you think, kind of related here, prevents some people from, you could say, getting on the path of personal growth and self-awareness and consciousness to the point where they're willing to act in good faith, as you say, versus someone else, let's say from the same family even, who doesn't make that choice and then has a pretty intense life of blaming themselves or other people. Like, how is it that one person can move into personal responsibility and another person can't? Like, what happens? Do you have any idea there?
I think you and I both are looking at the mystery of that. I mean, there's the classic nature-nurture element. Roughly a third of the variation in people, as you know, is heritable. The other 2/3 is acquired one way or another based on the environment, based on individuals. I think it's also true that people who come from the same background, even identical twins, from the moment of birth, they start having different experiences. And those different experiences gradually add up over time into differences and individuality inside them. And then I think about chaos theory, basically, complex systems theory. You know, the butterfly effect in the Amazon rainforest creates a hurricane 6 months later somewhere else in the world. Anyways, this idea that lots of little things gradually spin out over time. It's funny. So I'm in the change business, right?
Yeah.
And I've developed a very detailed theory of social emotional change and self-directed social emotional change that's grounded in brain science, right? With the HEAL process, taking the, okay, and it's amused me lately to recognize that there's wisdom at some point in that sort of I see you, Mara stance, where you just see the other person. You see, wow, the center will not hold with that person, or they just can't do it. They're just not going to do it. they're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting moment, right? As someone who's focused on growth, including oneself and teaching other people to grow, to look at someone else and go, I got it. You are not going to grow in this area. In part, maybe because you intend not to grow
Right.
in this area, and to come to peace with that. That's a really interesting moment, isn't it? Where you come to
Totally.
peace with it.
I often say that, you can, that's when you can leave someone if you're in a relationship, is when you finally accept that they're
Yeah.
not going to grow. Because the habit could be to try to change them, like you said, getting a blood from the stone for years, right? Decades even sometimes.
Yeah.
There's something about that acceptance that is, I think, freeing.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, too, I bet you'd agree. I bet you would say this very well, too. It's to do your own work.
Yeah.
And I think I have this kind of saying, the 80-20 rule in relationships. Put 20% of your effort into asking for what you need, trying to influence the other person. They're fine. But there's a real limit to that. And mostly put 80% of your focus on being a better relationship partner yourself.
Yeah.
Like taking unilateral, maximum reasonable personal responsibility for their wishes, their complaints, and so forth, and just zeroing them out.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 to the extent that you autonomously consider to be reasonable and, for the greater good and so forth. So on the, I think that's a huge focus here. And I think lately in the book I did, I went deeply into both the coolest, latest neuroscience and the most hardcore, radical, penetrating, teachings of the Buddha. And one of the things that's really interesting were his last words, as best they're understood. It's come down to us over the ages. We're not sure. Okay, fine. But a good translation of them, he says, things fall apart. Tread the path with care. That's a good translation of what he said, probably in ancient language. Things fall apart. There's impermanence. Things are empty. They break apart. They change. Conditions change. Tread your path with care, with conscientiousness, care, and also heart, care, caring, and courage. Tread your path with care. And that was his advice. It wasn't to, hey, create a bunch of priests and listen to them. He was basically saying, do your work.
Yeah.
Boom. It's on you. Boom. Only you can get yourself up that mountain.
Right. I'm curious, just to rewind in your life, would you take us to that moment when you, because we didn't talk about this in the first podcast, when you sort of got on the path of like something happened in your life and you decided, hey, I'm not liking what is going on and I want to change something. I think that can be inspiring for a listener to connect to, like, oh, wow, okay, I'm not alone here. So,
well, I'll tell you two turning points. Both happened when I was quite young. And I remember them pretty clearly. One was when I was about 6 years old, because I can locate. I was in outside our family's home in Illinois, and we were on the edge of cornfields there. I was with my family. I was the older of two kids at the time, and I'm standing outside my family's home. I know it feels like it's the fall. It's kind of cold outside, and I'm looking down into puddles left in the muddy ground by tractors coming through, and I'm wistful, and it's poignant, and I'm looking back at the lights of the house where the yellow light is streaming out, and what's absolutely there for me in that experience, which I can then recall, is this very just simple sense that there was a lot of unhappiness in that house, and it wasn't my fault. And that it was up to me, really, to deal with it and to figure out what to do about it. And I looked out at the lights on the hills in the distance of other houses as the sun set and the dusk gathered, and I felt like, okay, out there somewhere is my true home. That's where I will find my place. And I'm just a 6-year-old kid. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do this, but this is really what I'm going to do.
wow.
That's very existential and fundamental. And honestly, I don't think I'm that unique in having a sense of that at some age,
Right,
where you,
totally.
yeah. And I wasn't mad at what was in the house. I wasn't critical of it. It was just wistful. It was a kind of a seeing, oh, it's like this.
Right.
It's like this. It's not horrible. It's not horrible, but it's so far from happy. And my parents didn't know any better. No blame. Much love for them. They're not alive any longer. But, it's up to me. So that was a major turning point.
Yeah. Wow.
And then another one, really briefly, happened when I was kind of 15 or so. As a shy, dorky kid, I skipped a grade. I have a late birthday, so I was very young going through school. And my parents were loving, but neither of them were empathic. That's a very important distinction between love and empathy. And so I lacked the sense a lot that they really saw me and loved the me of me, right? And I'm sure as I got older as a kid too, I co-created that situation, not to blame the victim, not to blame the kid, but to acknowledge just all the factors that create a result. All right. That said, and also partly because I was shy, I was a real outsider in school, and I felt lonely and left out, and not quite bullied, but on the edge of that always. Didn't feel good. So I was pretty miserable by the time I was about 15. And I know it happened about then because I was reading Dune at the time, the classic, and the character was 15 or 14, 15 when the book starts. So he was exactly my age. So I related to it. And that book is about learning in a fundamental way. The Bene Gesserit, the training process, learning skills, whether it's to fight with a knife or, speak to people effectively or run a revolution in a planet full of sand. So the bottom line there was that I realized that no matter how bad it had been in the past and even how much it sucked in the present, every day I could learn a little bit. I could grow a little bit. I could be a little less weird around girls. I could be a little less weird around my parents. I could be more confident around other kids. I could change a little bit for the better every day. And I had that power. No one could stop me from becoming a little skillful, a little more aware, right? A little more capable every day. And that really, really set me on my way. I had so much to learn. I mean, I had a lot of misery to work through and heal and deal with. But I became a learner. The growth mindset phrasing. I just had a profound growth mindset. And I had a lot of growing I needed to do. I had a lot of suffering and neurosis I needed to shed. But it was empowering and happy and hopeful to realize that I could help myself a little every day. And if I just kept going, step by step up the mountain, as it were, I could eventually get to a better place. So those were two big ones.
Wow, those
I
are
could
so
add
cool.
a few others, but those are two really central in my life.
Yeah, I think the first story is definitely, like you said, there's going to be resonance there for people of feeling like an outsider in their own home type of thing. Sometime maybe that was a panicky feeling for some people, but maybe it was wistful like yours. I certainly had a moment like that. And then being 15 and being like all of a sudden seeing your pain somehow and being curious and wanting to learn. That's impactful.
I could help myself. I mean, I was a good student, so I had the learning school stuff thing kind of in place. Like, I could learn school stuff. And I suddenly started to realize, wow, I could learn more generally how to be happy, how to not be so awkward. I could learn how to talk with other people. And I think that's actually there's certain ideas you bump into when you're young, and as you get older, you realize, it's okay or it's overstated. There are others that the more you reflect on them, the more central and profound they seem to be. And this focus on growing and learning how to grow, right? If learning is the superpower of superpowers, it's the one that grows the rest of them. Yeah. So learning how to learn is the ultimate superpower of all, right? And so that to me has been central, and it's striking, isn't it? Like you're trained to be a therapist. I don't know about you. There was nothing I learned in grad school anywhere that was about how to help clients get the most out of the therapy they're going through based on what they're doing inside their own minds. Yeah, we don't have any, like fourth grade teachers, bless them, special place in heaven for teachers, right? They have a theory of learning. They teach kids to learn how to learn, right? They teach kids skills that are general that they can use to learn anything that they're learning. But we don't have that. We haven't had that in the broad space of counseling, therapy, coaching, mindfulness
No.
training. No theory of learning, and definitely not one at all grounded in how the brain actually works. So it's kind of weird. And it stands out more and more and more to me that learning how to help yourself grow a little bit from the experiences you're having every day so they don't just wash through you while the negative ones sink in. That is a profound power to claim for yourself.
Absolutely. Is this part of your theory of that you're talking about in your new book of the change?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's something I've just worked on over the years. And it's one of those, like I said, one of those ideas that just seems, it's the gift that keeps giving,
Yeah.
Because when you, like the little example I gave earlier, I'm going to help myself learn how to be a little less irkable by that kind of thing from my wife, right?
Yeah.
I'm not just going to get through it with her and kind of make up. I want to help myself be one synapse, one
synapse
bit
better.
at least, one bit at least more equanimous the next time, inevitably.
Yeah.
She says something like that.
Yeah, that's so cool. So are you kind of, I think I hear what you're saying, to put my own spin on it or summary, is learning how to learn is the super skill, the master skill, which I totally agree with. And I never certainly learned how to learn. I had to kind of teach myself how to learn when I was probably 29. When I went to graduate school to study psychology, I was like, shit, I don't even know how to study. Like, because I just kind of got through college. I partied and checked out and was totally not in myself. I was not here.
Yeah.
So I learned how to learn later, but it isn't until becoming an entrepreneur that I'm really learning how to learn, because of the challenges are so steep, and I so believe in the mission that I'm after, right? I'm willing to kind of go through anything, learn anything to accomplish the mission.
That's great.
And
And learning how to be a good guy.
Yeah, totally. A good husband, a parent,
Yeah.
like a decent human being. And it's we have this, again, tremendous opportunity, me as a white male now, in this, what we're going through. Like I have an opportunity to learn more about myself and become an even better human being, right?
Yeah.
So it's that part of it's exciting, even though it's horrific what's happening.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you're sort of, I'm not sure if you're calling it a theory, if you use that word, or if I did, but the social, can you just I just want to tie that into the brain a little bit and why it's so essential for brain health and just the health of our system to keep learning.
Yeah. So let's pick something that a person wants to develop inside themselves, right?
Okay.
So let's say they want to develop a genuine sort of lightening up and patience about stuff that other people do that feels kind of aggravating.
Yeah.
All right. So how do you develop that? How do you acquire that? The way the brain works is that it's a very straightforward two-step process, but people continually forget the second step. So they don't actually become any more patient over time. They don't become any more, they don't grow a shock absorber inside themselves, let's say, between themselves and what other people are doing that's genuinely aggravating, let's say. So how do you do it? Well, first, the two-step process is you have to experience whatever you want to grow. You have to be conscious. You have to have an experience of the idea or the sensation, the emotion, the desire, or the feeling of the body of the action. You have to experience it. You got to get that song playing in the inner iPod. And then in the second step, you have to have, that song has to leave a trace behind. It has to be recorded in the brain as a change of neural structure and function. Without that physical change, nice moment, maybe no lasting value by definition.
Okay.
All that money left on the table, no return on investment.
Yeah.
So how you can, now certain situations naturally really work that second step. If we're doing things that are intense and novel, like I've taken a lot of people rock climbing, wilderness learning, personal growth experiences, they have a high impact on people because it's such an intense setting. All right.
Yeah.
But what about the everyday experiences of daily life? A little moment of feeling grateful here, or a little moment of feeling appreciated by someone there. A little moment of realizing how to be a little more skillful with your partner. These too are opportunities to really help it sink in. And that's where I've really developed the kind of internal mental factors we can bring to bear on our experiences that plausibly, based on the evidence that exists so far, are more likely to leave lasting change inside. So, for example, you know the saying, neurons that fire together can wire together. So you want to keep them firing. So stay with the experience for a breath or longer. Right there is shocking. People routinely will realize when they start using these methods how much they tend to skittle along from one experience to another. They might be one good experience after another, but we're moving so quickly through them, they have no time to sink in.
Yeah,
to the
there's
brain.
no integration.
Right? Yeah, there's no duration to it. So you want to stay with it, feel it in your body. The more that our experiences are embodied, the more that they're not just heady and conceptual. There's a place for good ideas. Okay, great. But what's the feeling of them?
Yeah.
Feel it in your body. So what's it feel like to realize that, yeah, your wife, let's say, is just doing her thing. She's busy. She's distracted. She's reading the news. She's freaked out. The one thing she can control is what my air conditioner is doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you just try to feel that in your body so it's more than an idea. Or another thing you can do inside yourself, focus on what's rewarding about it. It's very interesting because when you emphasize, this goes back to your first kind of comment question, like what's the point of pursuing happiness? Well, one reason is that when we're having emotionally positive experiences, that helps us grow from the experiences we're having at the time. So if you focus on what feels good or is meaningful about whatever you want to grow, you're going to become that way more and more over time. You know, it's like you're helping yourself become. We're always becoming. You know, you just see people develop over the lifespan, and we're being influenced by all kinds of factors. Most of them outside us, some of them the long shadow of our childhoods. That's changing our brain along the way. There's no question about brain change. The only question is who's in charge, and is it going in a good direction?
Yeah, it seems like you're also, in a way, you haven't said it, but it seems like isn't dopamine tied into this process a little bit?
Oh yeah. So yeah, dopamine's present. It's a neurochemical, when that's involved with the sense of reward. And exactly right. As dopamine activity increases, the sense of enjoyability or satisfaction, let's say, in doing something increases. The experience we're having at the time is flagged for protection as it gets consolidated into long-term storage. So that's one way. There are others as well. For me, the crux boils down to, I could say just 4 words: have it, enjoy it. Have the experiences that are beneficial to you, usually because you're already having them, sometimes because you deliberately create them. I don't believe in positive thinking. I believe in realistic thinking. You want to actually see what's true. So when you have it, and then slow it down, enjoy it. It's weirdly difficult for different reasons. For men, I've seen there are reasons like they don't want to, they're like stoic, tough. I know I'm gender stereotyping, but hello, there are generalizations sometimes.
Sure.
Women, it's like, oh, it's not my role to feel good. My job's to make you feel good, for whatever the reasons might be. And people can see what actually fits for them. People have often a hard time at taking in the good.
Absolutely. I've struggled with that most of my life. Like I achieve a victory or something, and I'm on to the next thing, right? And it's a good practice for me to have a positive experience, accomplish a goal, and like actually meditate for a minute and really feel and drink in the accomplishment. And sometimes it takes, honey, will you tell me what I just did? Or like, is this real?
That's good.
And because I've, defended against, I don't know, celebration or something. So it's a practice for me, for sure.
So to turn the tables on you a little bit,
Yeah.
Has doing that made you lose your edge? Or has it actually made you more ambitious and effective?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say the latter.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
the
'cause the
myth
fear-
is that it would make us lose our edge.
Exactly. The fear is, no, I'm going to just sit and like celebrate this. Like I'm going to lose my edge. Yeah, exactly. Someone's going to pass me or whatever.
Yeah. Stay hungry, stay thirsty.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And yet it's helped you be more ambitious and reach for greater heights and keep going and be more resilient.
Yeah. And I think you're telling me in a way, I think I heard a neuroscientist say this at some point too. Might have been you. I don't know. But it's like, if I can do that, if I can, again, acknowledge and like almost feel the dopamine, feel the experience in my body, right? I'm priming, my whole system is saying, yes, do more of this. So I'm
Yes.
more likely to repeat and go farther, right?
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's it. Part of what I'm struck by is how simple it actually is. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
It's about developing good habits, right? And we develop them through repetition and reinforcement. Why don't we apply that to
It's
becoming?
so straightforward.
I know. Why don't we apply that to becoming more, grateful or wiser or calmer or contented?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Rick, we're winding down. I got a couple more questions for you, and then I want to hear where people can find you and your book, and maybe you can give us a couple little headlines of your book. A question I don't think I asked you at the time because I don't think it was in place yet. But so one of my missions here is to reach 1 million teens and 10 million families with relationship education. I want to change the world through helping people work out their differences, right? And if I had 1 million, or not 1 million, if I had 1,000 of those teens, let's say, in an auditorium, and I could only share one thing with them about relationships, and you could whisper in my ear to tell me what to tell them, what would you want me to tell them?
Wow. So I'm filtering through what would be valuable and what would be hearable. Right?
Right, because you've gone through adolescence with your kids.
Oh, yeah. And I've worked with teens a lot, as a therapist. I think, when I think back what I would have loved to have heard, and when I think the teens that I've worked with really shift when it lands, is you really are a fundamentally good person. You really are. Innately, fundamentally good. You're good morally, you have good instincts. You don't always act from them maybe, but you have goodness in your heart. And also, you're a good person. You're kind of cool, right? You've got stuff going for you. You are lovable. You are a kind of person that people would want to be friends with deep down inside yourself, would want to love.
Yeah.
And you can trust that and you can count on that and you can build from there.
Nice.
I think that's what I would start with.
Yeah, beautiful.
I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's sure the one that came from my heart.
Oh, I mean, how many young people could use that reminder as they compare themselves to everyone else on Instagram? That's key. Thank you.
Yeah.
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 Cool. And where can we find out about your new book, Neurodharma, and you have tons of free resources, so let us know.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So best place, go to my website, rickhanson.net. Talks, guided meditations, videos, articles, all kinds of quick little things. I'm a nuggets guy. I'm interested in the nuggets that people can use today, news you can use. Yeah. And also they can find out about this new book, which is really about what can we learn from the Olympic athletes of mental training, the contemplatives throughout history, and then apply to ourselves to becoming more resilient and happier and frankly more skillful and loving with other people down here in everyday life. So that's what the book's about. It's not a religious book. I just grabbed the word dharma. It comes from India. It simply means the truth of things. And I think of what the book's about basically is the truth of who we are, both from the outside in and the inside out. Outside in through science, inside out through mindfulness and self-knowledge and psychology and wisdom. And then when you bring them together, that's what I call neurodharma.
Yeah,
right?
Super.
So yeah, check it out, rickhanson.net.
Okay, cool. And we'll put all those links in the show notes. Great, Rick.
Good.
Awesome seeing you again. Thanks so much. I could go on for hours with you, but I really appreciate just what you're doing in the world. Thanks.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you're doing as well. And I think it's your mission is great. I totally support it. May it be so.
Yeah, it will.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep telling myself because I'm going to change my brain here on the way,
That's it. That's good.
Okay, awesome interview with Dr. Rick Hanson. Go check him out at rickhanson.net. That's Hanson, Hanson. And check out his new book, Neurodharma, New Science, Ancient Wisdom, and 7 Practices of the Highest Happiness. Go check that out, all right? And make sure you listen to his other podcast. I listened to it recently. It was so good. I was like, whoa. His first episode was really good about being triggered in the brain, and it was fascinating. Your action step is to learn something new, and we're going to just call it listening to someone. So he says you got to experience whatever you want to grow, right? That's the first step. Second step, it has to be recorded in the brain. Usually that's done when you're in an emotional state, ideally some kind of gratitude or appreciation. It could be a negative emotion too, but that's not what I'm recommending here. We do learn through negative experiences. But see if you can have a positive experience of listening to someone in conflict and really remember what that feels like to do a good job listening. Just see if you can feel what that feels like, okay? And then, of course, share with a friend what you just learned, or share about this podcast, one takeaway from it, okay? That should be pretty easy. Awesome. Thanks for playing, guys. And again, if you want to join our coaching training program and change your life, change your career, work for yourself, make good money, meet an incredible group of people, and have a transformational journey inward, come hang out with us. Come play with us. relationshipschool.com/RCT to apply for our coaching program. Okay, everybody, take care and be well. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Share one of these videos with a friend. We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.